Hey book lovers, I'm Elise, and today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of May. So it's a bit of a standing joke on my channel. I don't really know what I'm doing as far as my wrap-ups go. I never really know what kind of style I like to do, so I've been experimenting for the last couple of months. This month I decided to try something new, and that is having all the books that I read compete against one another in the form of a book bracket to determine objectively which book that I read should be crowned the best book of the month. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be my favorite book, a book that objectively most people would probably enjoy. So I have a cup here full of all the titles of the books that I read this month, so we will get to this in a second. First, let's go over a little bit of statistics. As far as genres go this month, I read 5 thrillers, 3 dystopian, 3 horror, 2 romance, 2 contemporary, and 1 fantasy. Now let's go over all 16 books in the order that I read them and what I rated them. The first book that I read this month was The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This is a thriller, and actually the second book that I read by this author. Of course, as soon as I start to film, the lawn people show up, so you can hear weed whackers and lawnmowers. I apologize. The next book that I read this month is a middle grade horror called What Lives in the Woods by Lindsay Curry. This one I read for Bookathon, hosted by Keisha of A Book Like You, Kendall of Bookphoria, and Hope over at Hope on the Coast, and I rated it 4 stars. Then I read Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is an adult fantasy, and I rated that 4.5 stars. Next I read a horror, which was The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor, and I rated that 3 stars. This was my second CJ Tudor, and so far I'm not loving her books, but I think I'll give her one more try. Then I read a thriller over on Kindle Unlimited, which was The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and I rated that 4 stars. The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, which I rated 3.5 stars. A House with Good Bones, which is a brand new horror by T. Kingfisher, which I rated 2 stars. The Younger Wife by Sally Hepworth, which is a thriller, and I rated that 3 stars. And for the first time ever, I finally read The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, which is a YA dystopian, and I rated this 4 stars. Next is a new release thriller, You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. I rated this one 4 stars. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren, which I rated 3.5 stars. Black Girls Must Have It All by Jane Allen. This is book 3 in a contemporary series, and I rated this one 2.5 stars. The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which is a thriller that I rated 3 stars. Next is an ARC that I received over on NetGalley. It's a contemporary fiction, Big Gay Wedding by Byron Lane, and I rated this one 5 stars. Next is another dystopian, Camp Zero by Michelle Min Sterling, and I rated this one 3.5 stars. And finally, to end the month, I read book 2 in the Hunger Games series, Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. Again, this is a YA dystopian series, and I rated this one 3.5 stars. So here comes the fun part, and I have to try to hurry because the day got away from me and I have to go pick up my kids from school in like 20 minutes. So hopefully I can get through all of this. If I have to pick it up later, I guess I will. All 16 books that I read this month, I have written on pieces of paper in this little cup, and what I'm going to do is pull out 2 at a time and determine as objectively as possible which book is better and why. And I'm gonna keep doing that until I get to one book, which is supposed to be the best book of the month. Here's 1, 2. You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose, and A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. That one is not going to be hard. You Should Have Come Here, it's a pretty slow burn thriller. I actually did a reading vlog where I read this one, A House with Good Bones, and The True Love Experiment. So I go into a lot more detail there, but this book is about Grace and Calvin. There are 2 people that stay together at this Airbnb. Calvin owns the Airbnb. It's on his ranch in Wyoming, and Grace is his guest. She traveled all the way from New York City. And there's a lot of suspense. There's a lot of romance because they are 2 attractive people alone on this ranch together. It gets pretty wild. Like I said, it is very slow burn, so keep that in mind if you haven't read this yet but you're thinking of trying it out. A lot of people have DNF'd it because it was so slow moving in the beginning, but I personally think it is completely worth it. The twist blew me away. I did not see it coming. And then A House with Good Bones is a horror about a woman who goes home to her mom's house, which used to be her grandma's house, and she finds out that her mom is acting kind of strange. Her grandma passed away quite some time ago, and when she did, her mom mom kind of took over the house and redecorated it, but now a lot of the characteristics of the home that was present when the grandma was still living have kind of started to come back. Paint colors reverting back to what they were, old furniture and artwork being brought back down from the attic. It's a very strange book, and I unfortunately was not a fan. I've read a few T. Kingfisher now. This is definitely not my favorite. So of the two, You Shouldn't Have Come Here and A House with Good Bones, I pick You Shouldn't Have Come Here. Okay, here's one and here's two. Camp Zero by Michelle Min Sterling and What Lives in the Woods by Lindsay Curry. Okay. Camp Zero is dystopian, so it takes place in the not too distant future. I want to say like the 2050s, and it follows 3 points of view. There is a woman who is part of like a female research group. It takes place at this facility in Canada, and all these different women have different roles to play in the science field, and they are basically trying to collect data and do research and trying to report back to their base in the United States, because the world is very quickly becoming uninhabitable due to environmental reasons. Many places in the US are becoming too hot to be livable, and so people are progressively moving farther and farther north, and so the land in Canada, the real estate's becoming very competitive, and people are trying to build these places that people can go to live. So for instance, off the coast of Boston, there's what's called a floating city, and it's basically a city in a bubble that is protected from the environment outside. And then Camp Zero is one of these places where it's trying to be built to protect the people that live there from the environmental things going on. A second point of view in this book is a guy, I can't remember his name, I want to say it's Grant, but I could be wrong. He recently graduated and he is relocated to this Camp Zero to teach a lot of the people that work there. A third point of view is a woman called Rose, who she works at this club where they do adult type entertainment. So they are intimacy companions with some of the wealthier people that live in this camp. Very interesting. I like the overall message of this book. What Lives in the Woods is a middle grade horror. It's basically like a haunted manor, and this girl and her family, her father does renovations, and they move from Chicago to Saugatuck just temporarily so that they can do these renovations. It was very cute. It was spooky, but at, a very childlike level. I enjoyed it. This one is actually really interesting because it takes place in Saugatuck, Michigan, which is not too far from where I live. And the book was the buddy read for Bookathon this year, and Lindsay Curry actually joined us on the live with the hosts Keisha, Kendall, and Hope, and she had talked about how the place that they go, the place that they are renovating, is a real place in Saugatuck, and I'm like, holy cow, I need to go there. Of these two books, I'm gonna go with Camp Zero as the winner, just because I think objectively more people would probably enjoy it. 1, 2. The Hunger Games and The True Love Experiment. So The Hunger Games, in case you don't know, is a YA dystopian series. It's set in a world, at least this one is set in a world where there are 12 different districts in this world called Pan Am. And every year they host what's called the Hunger Games. So people of a certain age, between the ages of, I can't remember the age that it starts, up to a certain age, your name is entered into this drawing. And every year they draw a boy and a girl to enter into the Hunger Games, which is basically a fight to the death, and it's broadcasted for all of Pan Am to watch, and people can sponsor certain players. So as people are watching, if somebody that they are rooting for is in a spot of trouble or can't find a water source and are about to die of thirst or get hurt and need medicine or something, their sponsors can pay to have things sent to them to kind of help them out. But also to make things interesting, the head people in the capital, they can kind of throw a wrench into the mix and make a volcano erupt, or it starts raining acid rain, or things like that. Really, really interesting. I love the world building in this. I'd never read this before. I have watched the movies a couple times, but this is my first time reading the book, and I was blown away. I was honestly blown away. It was very easy to get into the story. I loved the world building. I was immediately invested into this. So yeah, that's that one. And then The True Love Experiment, I did own this one. I've already sold it on Pango. It is actually the follow-up to to The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, and it follows one of the characters out of that book, who's called Fizzy. Fizzy is a romance author, and she ends up starring in this dating show, and all the contestants are a certain level of compatibility with Fizzy based off of the genetic ally DNA testing that is focused on in The Soulmate Equation. Along the way, Fizzy falls in love with the producer of the show, and so they are kind of grappling with their attraction for one another, while at the same time Fizzy is meant to be falling in love with one of the contestants on the show. Overall, this one, I didn't love the attraction, lust, whatever, that formed between Fizzy and Connor, who is the producer of the show. It seemed really instantaneous to me, which I wasn't buying it. Once it was established that they liked each other, I liked their dynamic and their chemistry, but going from, complete strangers to, oh my gosh, I want you, was just like, whoo, okay, slow down. And the name of the book is the name of the show in the book, but despite that, the show's honestly not a big focus at all. I don't remember any of the contestants or who won or anything like that. Between these two books, I would say that the better book is The Hunger Games. I can probably do one more before I have to get going. Here's 1, 2, Catching Fire, and The Soulmate Equation. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. It would have been even more hilarious if I would have gotten The Soulmate Equation with The Hunger Games, because those were both the first in the series or whatever. All right, so Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins is the follow-up to The Hunger Games. This one I didn't like as much. The first half of the book is pretty slow and boring, especially coming off of The Hunger Games, which was like so much action, so much like edge of your seat things kind of going on. And then this one, it wasn't as exciting. But about the halfway mark, things kind of gear up. And the last half of the book, I really did enjoy. But because of the differences there, I couldn't justify rating this as highly as I did The Hunger Games. So that's why this one got a lower rating. And then The Soulmate Equation, which I've also already sold on Pango, is the book that comes before The True Love Experiment. In The Soulmate Equation, we focus on Jess, who is Fizzy's best friend. She's a single mom, and she's kind of like done with dating until she comes across genetic ally DNA testing that is supposed to, based on your DNA and a lot of different markers that scientists have really pinpointed, this test is supposed to tell you your compatibility with somebody else based on these markers. So basically the percentage of compatibility that two people could have. She ends up doing the test after much convincing from Fizzy, and it turns out that the person that she has a really, really high compatibility with is the founder of the company. So between those two books, Catching Fire and The Soulmate Equation, I'm gonna go with The Soulmate Equation. I really liked the romance in The Soulmate Equation. It gave me butterflies, and the love interest, Dr. River Pena, I found him quite attractive. Maybe one more. This is fun. I'm enjoying. And 2, Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher, and The Housemaid. Oh boy. Sword Heart is an adult fantasy, and it follows, forgive me, I'm completely blanking on character names right now, but it follows this girl. In the beginning of the book, let me try to remember. Her husband recently passed, and she's now being forced to enter into a marriage with somebody that she has zero interest in. It's more of a business arrangement because money and wealth and property and all that fun stuff. She doesn't want to go through with it, and she's locked in her room one night, and there's like a sword hanging on the wall. She takes the sword off of the wall and decides to end her life, and she's trying to figure out the mechanics of how to do that. She's like, how does one impale oneself? She ends up trying to put it on the floor, and she's just gonna fall onto it. Well, there's actually a man that was magically imprisoned inside the sword, and he emerges from the sword when she unsheathes it. And he is basically like, whoa, wait, what are you doing? Don't do this. You don't have to do this. And he helps her escape, and then they go on this grand adventure, and it was a good time. It was a good time. It was funny as hell. I really enjoyed it. I kind of forgot how much I enjoyed it until I was talking about it just now. And then The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Okay, this one. I read this one on Kindle Unlimited. This book, it's a popcorn thriller. It's really fast paced. The chapters are short. It was good. The primary reason that I did not rate this one 5 stars was because, one, the writing is very, very, very basic. In some instances, I would even say it was on the verge of bad writing. And there's a couple of POVs at one point point, and there wasn't really much difference in personality when it switched. So if it hadn't been for the name of the character at the beginning of the chapter, it probably would have taken me a minute to catch on to whose point of view we were reading. So that I took issue with, and then also the ending. It wrapped up entirely way too quickly. Even though I loved Sword Heart more than I loved The Housemaid, I think objectively The Housemaid would win this round. Now I have to go get my kids and grab some groceries, so I will be back later. Okay, hi, I'm back. It's been 4 hours. I had to go get my kids and then get groceries. And then I got home and I actually had to finish working. So where were we? 1, 2. The Guest List by Lucy Foley and Black Girls Must Have It All by Jane Allen. Ooh, that's a tough one. Mostly tough because I didn't particularly care for either of these. So The Guest List by Lucy Foley, I think I said I rated this one 3 stars. So this is about a wedding taking place on an island off the coast of Ireland, I believe, and like the Faroe Islands, I think. It wasn't like super exciting as far as thrillers go, and I guess it was like a mystery thriller. So there's a number of people whose point of view that you read from, but then there's also the point of view of the day of the wedding. And on the day of the wedding, somebody is found dead. And so it's not up until the very end that you find out who it was and who killed them and why. Every time that I've heard people talk about this book, they've mentioned the fact that none of the characters are likable. And I don't think that's 100% true, because there's a couple that I liked or at least rooted for, but there are definitely a lot that I didn't really like. So it seemed pretty obvious to me who was the person that gets, but the person that did the act of, that part surprised me. All in all, I mean, it wasn't terrible, but not my favorite. And then Black Girls Must Have It All. This is book number 3 in a contemporary fiction series that starts with Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. That book, the first book in this series, I really enjoyed that one. I liked it a lot. So it follows this character whose name escapes me at the moment, Tabitha Walker, and I don't know if she's specifically a journalist, but she works for the news channel. She's doing really well for herself. I mean, she's got a great job, financially stable. She has her own place, but she goes to the doctor, and the doctor basically tells her like, hey, if you wanted to have kids anytime, now's the time to do it because your fertility is drastically declining. Up until that moment, Tabitha never really thought that much about having kids, or it was still kind of like some faraway idea of something that would happen at the right time. So she kind of starts to panic a little bit. So this series is basically her journey from that moment through, you know, things that happen. This one just wasn't as interesting, and actually I read a lot of the reviews on Goodreads, and a lot of fans were kind of saying very similar things, saying that it didn't really seem necessary for a third book, and unfortunately I do have to agree. I'm gonna have to say that The Guest List would be the better book. Okay, we have 4 left. So 1, 2. Big Gay Wedding by Byron Lane and The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor. Okay, I'm just so excited to talk about this one. So first of all, I found this book randomly on NetGalley, okay? The cover, well, you can see it right here. This is the cover. I'm not even a huge fan of blue, but for whatever reason, it just popped out at me. I'm like, oh, that looks fun. And like how loud and out that the title is. So I read the synopsis and I'm like, you know what, this sounds like a fun time. So I requested it, not thinking much of it. I ended up getting approved for the ARC and I started it, and not long into the book at all, I'm like, this is funny. So the main character in this book is a woman named Chrissy. She has a farm in Louisiana, not far from New Orleans. It's just her. Her husband's passed away. Her son is all grown up and he lives in Los Angeles. She's turned this farm into a society ranch, and she calls it the Polite Society Ranch. She rescues different animals, and it's just a home for farm animals to live out the rest of their lives as happy as can be. Chrissy is just this very traditional woman. So her son Barnett, he accidentally came out to his parents when he was in junior high or high school because he ordered a book. I think it's Being Gay for Dummies or something like that. He had it shipped to his house. His parents found the package and opened it, and once they realized what book it was, they like got on his case and made him burn the book, and it was a bit traumatizing for him. But then his dad passes away and Barnett moves away to Los Angeles. She finds out that he's coming home and she's all excited. She's thinking like, okay, he had his fun in Los Angeles, now he's coming home to keep keep running the farm after I go. Well, he gets there and it's been a long time since they've seen each other and things are like a little awkward at first. It ends up coming out that the roommate that he's been telling his mom about for like the past 5 years isn't in fact a roommate, but his boyfriend, now fiance. The whole book is Barnett bringing his fiance back to Louisiana to meet his mom, meet his grandpa, his papa, introduce him to the family, and announce the fact that they're getting married. What ensues is like the most heartfelt, hilarious, chaotic gay party ever. I loved every second of it. The writing style is very interesting. I don't think I've seen this. Like, I've seen multiple points of view, okay? I've seen chapters go from person to person to person to person. This book, there's no like designated point of view per chapter. The entire book just like casually floats around to different people's points of view. It's like this omniscient style of storytelling. You even get into the mind of some of the animals on the farm. I loved all the characters. Not all the characters. There are some of the characters that are like super homophobic. Most of the characters are just hilarious. That was my 5-star read for the month, obviously. And then The Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor. This one follows a priest and her daughter who travel to this town. I can't remember where because she's the new priest. She's taking over. The last priest is no longer with us. There's this urban legend in town of these girls called the Burning Girls. And I can't really remember like if it was a house fire or if they were burned at the stake or what have you. These burning girls, they have apparitions that, you know, happen and people see them. And I recall vibes from this book and I liked the vibes. It was kind of eerie, kind of spooky, kind of, you know, mysterious. But like as far as the story goes, I don't really remember what happened. In fact, when I got to the end of the book and something was talked about that had supposedly been revealed like the previous chapter, I'm like, whoa, wait, what? Objectively speaking, between a thriller that was a 3-star read for me, had some cool vibes, but isn't really sticking with me, versus a book that I thought was like a great time, I'm gonna say that Big Gay Wedding wins this round. So there's 2 more in here. The Last Word by Taylor Adams and The Younger Wife by Sally Hepworth. The Last Word, of course, is the new release by Taylor Adams. This one follows Emma Carpenter. She and her dog Laika are house sitting this house on the coast of Washington. All she does all day is read books on her Kindle and hang out with her dog and play hangman on a whiteboard in the window with the neighbor across the way. One day, she reads this horror novel on her Kindle and it's horrendous, and she decides to leave a scathing review, and the author is not very pleased about it. So he sees the review, he reaches out to her and he's like, hey, take down the review. And she's like, hey, no. And so it's like this back and forth thing. The author starts to get super offensive, saying things like, you know, you're not really my target audience. Women don't typically read thriller and horror, so it makes sense that you wouldn't understand it, and yada yada yada. I need you to take down the review. And she's like, no, absolutely not. Psycho author may or may not start stalking the reader and reviewer. Chaos ensues. This book was super entertaining, incredibly ridiculous, but a good time nonetheless. The Younger Wife by Sally Hepworth. So this one follows 3 different women. There's the main character, her sister, and then their father's new wife. So the girl's mom, she's suffering from Alzheimer's, and the dad, I think before the divorce is even finalized or initiated, if I recall, he meets, falls in love with, and proposes to this much younger woman. She's like the age of his daughters. It was okay. I rated it 3 stars, I think. Not super thrilling. The way things panned out, they made sense. I do really like Sally Hepworth's character work. Her characters are really well fleshed out, and just you really get into the minds of them and you learn a lot about them and who they are as a person, things that may have happened in their past that formed them into the person that they are today. Objectively, between these 2 books, especially from a thriller standpoint, I'm gonna have to go with The Last Word. I think more people would get a kick out of that one because it is super entertaining, as ridiculous as it may be. Okay, the books that won that first round, we're gonna put it back and we're gonna do it all over again. The Soulmate Equation and The Last Word. So we've got romance versus thriller. So within their own genre, how did The Soulmate Equation hold up as a romance, and how did The Last Word hold up as a thriller? Objectively speaking, I think The Last Word is a better thriller than The Soulmate Equation is a romance. The Housemaid versus The Guest List. I'm gonna say The Housemaid because of how fast-paced it was and the twists, multiple twists in that. really got me. So writing is better in the guest list, but Housemaid was definitely a more fun time. You Shouldn't Have Come Here versus Camp Zero. Okay. Whew. I think I'm gonna go with Camp Zero on this one because as a thriller, this one is a slow burn. And a lot of people who are genuine thriller lovers have either DNF'd this or not enjoyed it. Whereas Camp Zero, it's a dystopian. And being a dystopian, I think it did dystopian really, really well. And again, I love the overall message of the book having to do with environmental issues and global warming. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Camp Zero on this one. The Hunger Games versus Big Gay Wedding. Oh gosh. As much as I loved Big Gay Wedding, you cannot deny the fandom that this book has created, both in book form and movie form. The world building that has come from this, hands down, Hunger Games wins this one. We're down to 4 selections now. This is kind of fun. I think I might keep doing this every month. Let me know in the comments below. Is this fun? Like, do you enjoy this? Battle of the books. Okay. The Housemaid versus Camp Zero. Okay. I mean, I think it's gotta be Housemaid, right? Again, super fast pace, super entertaining. It was part of the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2022. The Housemaid. I don't even remember what the other two were. The Last Word, versus The Hunger Games. Oh no. Crap. I don't know. I think for the same reason as before, I'm gonna have to go with The Hunger Games, which means the final battle is between The Housemaid and The Hunger Games. Let's go to Goodreads and see what Goodreads has to say. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, 8 million ratings with a 4.33 average star rating. Whereas The Housemaid, 323,000 ratings with a 4.36 average star rating. Oh my goodness. This is hard. Okay, objectively, I think out of all the books that I read in the month of May, the book that is the best, that I would recommend the most to people, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. But like I said, my personal favorite book of the month of May was Big Gay Wedding by Byron Lane. That was fun. I really enjoyed that. I'm losing daylight. I hope y'all can still see me. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And it was easy to talk about the books because I was doing like an analysis of them up against another book. So this might work for me. So let me know down in the comments below, did you enjoy this type of wrap up? Is that something you want to see me keep doing? Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I appreciate you guys being here. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And until next time, bye.